Most of you are probably familiar with the quote from Gandhi that this service is inspired by. Be the change you wish to see in the world. Be the change you wish to see in the world. Well, Gandhi never actually said it. But indeed, it fits in with the way that Gandhi lived his life. In fact, the actual quote, it's really kind of a paraphrase, and the actual quote, while not quite as concise and pithy, is richer. He says, "We but mirror the world. All the tendencies present in the outer world are to be found in the world of our body. If we could change ourselves, the tendencies in the world would also change. As we change our own nature, so does the attitude of the world change towards us. This is the divine mystery supreme. A wonderful thing it is and the source of our happiness. We need not wait to see what others do." Now, it contains the same basic sentiment as be the change you wish to see in the world. Pushing us not to wait to see what others do, it puts the focus and the onus on us. It's not about judging others or demanding or expecting that they change. It's a recognition that the only thing we have control over is ourselves. We cannot change other people. We can't truly change the world. We can only change how we act in relationship to others and the world. And expecting others to change is usually a recipe for frustration and disappointment. As any of us who's been in any long-term relationship can attest, or any relationship really of any sort. So if we make mirrors of the world, when we make a change in our own lives, the world is changed. And that change then is reflected in others as well. If we never offered up an alternative to the world as it is, the world is bound to remain the same. It is through these actions, through our actions, which diverge from the dominant way of the world, that we begin to change the world. Now, I want to tell you about one of the ways that I try being the change that I wish to see. Most of you know that I'm vegan. Okay, mostly vegan. I don't eat meat or dairy products, but I will eat eggs from my own chickens or chickens which are pasture-raised. But I often call myself vegan because it's easier than saying I'm an ovo-vegetarian, but only if the eggs are pasture-raised. And then to have the person respond, "Well, how do you know if it's pasteurized?" And then I say, no, pasture-raised, not pasteurized. Oh. Are free-range and cage-free eggs okay? Well, free-range is a deceptive label trying to trick you into thinking it's pasture-raised, and cage-free sounds a lot more humane than it actually is. The more you know. Anyway. Actually, there is an advantage to telling people the specifics, because then I do get to share that little piece of information that I just shared with you just then. But the primary reason I moved towards veganism is that I wanted to see our food system transformed into one that is healthy, ethical, just, and sustainable, none of which it is at this point. And since I don't own a corporate agribusiness, I chose to support my individual, or my values with my individual choices, knowing they would have some impact, however small. But as much as systemic change was important to my decision, it was also about trying to live in closer alignment with my values. I didn't want to let the external world, that external system, dictate the way I was in relationship to other creatures and the environment. So I chose to do my part to change. And I didn't become mostly vegan overnight. It was a slow process that took over a decade. Being the change we wish to see in the world does not have to be fast or dramatic. It started when I read Eric Schlosser's book, Fast Food Nation, which opened my eyes about the way the industrial food system exploits animals, as well as workers in the fields, the slaughterhouses, and behind the cash register, and harms our health in the search for ever more profit. Not wanting to support that system, I stopped eating at most fast food chains. And it was around this time that I also started dating a vegetarian, and I soon gave up red meat altogether. Now, she didn't ever pressure me to become vegetarian, nor did she ask me to give up red meat. And I didn't do it just to impress her. Indeed, it was several weeks before I told her I had stopped because I wanted it to be my choice. Although it was something I had already been considering, the reality was that her vegetarianism was a catalyst for my decision. Being that change in yourself does have impact on those around you. Several years went by before I read Barbara Kingsolver's book, Animal Vegetable Miracle, about her family's experiment starting a farm and eating only foods they were able to grow themselves or obtain locally for a whole year. An experience she contrasted with the factory farms and industrial agriculture, which are not only cruel and destructive, but one of the top contributors to climate change, I learned. And I became increasingly interested in organic and local food, starting my own garden, shopping at farmers markets, and studying the labels at grocery stores to see where things came from. And I became increasingly concerned about the sources of the chicken or the eggs or the milk. It wasn't killing the animals that bothered me as much as the suffering they experienced in their lives, as well as the environmental devastation. So I started buying chicken from a seller at the farmer's market who raised his own chickens. And at the time, as I was mostly just cooking for myself, as a result, twice in a row, or a couple weeks in a row, I didn't cook the chicken fast enough and part of it spoiled. And this chicken was expensive, so I thought, well, this is a waste. And so I just didn't buy it for a few more weeks. And then one day, I realized that I hadn't had any meat in over a month. And I thought, well, that wasn't so hard. So 10 years ago, I decided if I could become a vegetarian unintentionally, it wouldn't be that hard to become one intentionally. Sometimes being the change comes in unexpected ways. And for many years after that, I toyed with the idea of being vegan, but the thought of giving up butter and cheese and eggs was daunting. But between my conscience tugging on me and living with a vegan roommate 2 years ago, I made the leap and cut dairy out of my diet. Although the choices I made were only about my own diet, each choice I made had impact on those around me. Friends, partners, roommates, co-workers, family members shifted their behavior and thinking based on my small actions. The scope of the changes varied. Maybe it was choosing a vegetarian meal here or there. Some stopped cooking meat when we shared meals together and even kept doing that when I wasn't around. Some started shopping at farmers markets or planted their own vegetable gardens. And who knows what ripple effects those changes that they made had on those around them. That's the power of being the change you wish to see in the world. As we change ourselves, the tendencies of the world also change. And we don't have to waste our energy trying to change other people. Our example is often the most compelling argument. Yet the desire to change others can be hard to set aside. Because my parents are amongst the closest people to me, I have a stronger desire to shift their behavior than others around me, and that has not always been well received. On many occasions, I would tell them, particularly my dad, about how they should eat less meat and buy fruits and vegetables that are local and in season, preferably coming from the farmer's market. It often came in something like the form of a lecture, and often my urgings were met with defensiveness and intransigence. But one day I decided to take a different approach, and I invited my dad to come with me to the farmer's market. And he was blown away by the selection that they had on offer. These days he goes to the farmer's market every Sunday, and he is in love with it. He not only knows most of the vendors by name, he knows what's going on in their lives, weddings, graduations, illnesses, babies. Really, he loves farmers markets more than I do. As St. Francis of Assisi famously said, preach the gospel at all times. If necessary, use words. This is a beautiful sentiment, one which makes me wonder if I guess it's a good thing that, like the Gandhi poet, St. Francis also never said those words. In fact, the closest he came was instructing the friars of the Franciscan order to preach by their deeds. And at that time, when many clergy lived extravagantly, St. Francis's vows of poverty was a powerful example of preaching the gospel without words. But what the quote gets wrong is that St. Francis actually preached with words a lot, even in places where they might not like to hear it, like at extravagant parties thrown by the wealthy. Indeed, Francis is usually depicted surrounded by birds because he is even said to have preached the gospel to them. That's how much of a preacher he was. The wisdom to be found in that misattributed quote is not that we should shy away from using words to call for justice, love, equity, sustainability, peace, or compassion. There would be no reason for me to be up here preaching to you this morning if that were the case. Instead, the quote reminds us that actions speak louder than words. It reminds us that words ring hollow if they are not backed up by action, or especially if they are contradicted by our actions. This does not mean we should refrain from passing on our wisdom or challenging others unless we have fully internalized it ourselves. I often preach about the topics that I need to hear most. While I try to practice what I preach, the fact that it's called practice indicates the reality is that I am, that we all are, works in progress, simply trying to do the best that we can in any given moment. And the reality is that living by example, that being the change, is almost always more compelling. It's harder to argue against or push back. And one of the reasons that Gandhi and St. Francis were such successful leaders is that they made dramatic countercultural choices in the ways that they lived their lives, and they spoke out about it. Both forsook material possessions and lived lives that were deeply religious. And through their actions and their words, they were able to inspire countless people across generations, across centuries, to change, creating an entirely new order in their faith traditions, and in Gandhi's case, helping win independence for his people from the British Empire. Of course, both did so in the face of tremendous opposition. When we choose to be the change we wish to see in the world, we may still find ourselves opposed by those who see our actions as a threat to their view of the world or the way they should live their lives. When Gandhi says, as we change our own nature, so does the attitude of the world change towards us. That change in attitude may not be towards acceptance. Indeed, it is often the opposite. Which is why it is even more important that we stand resolute in our principles and our values. So what does this mean for us at this moment in time when the powers that be are not in alignment with our values? Indeed, it often seems like the change that needs to happen, since it's not going to happen in Washington, D.C., needs to happen in our communities, in our individual lives, making those small changes. and letting those effects ripple out. That may be planting a garden or changing the way we eat food. It may be organizing to work to make our space more sustainable, more welcoming to people, to push back against oppression, to stand up. When whole classes of people are demonized because of their religion or their ethnicity or their national identity or their country of origin. It's incredibly important to stay grounded. It may be in doing the work and being the change to work within our political system, to make small changes. I'm sure many people here are active in groups like Indivisible. And it's so incredibly important. Indeed, that is what we can do. That's all we can do. And so, since this is also the Sunday when we have welcomed and honored new members, I want to be clear that we will never change the world simply by showing up to church. We will only change the world collectively as a community by being the church we want to be. By being the church that models the future, that models the values of justice, of equity, compassion in human relations, of interdependence, of freedom the freedom to search for truth and meaning, and to support our democratic principles, to work for justice and peace and equality. So here in this religious community, to those of you who have been here for decades, to those of you who have recently joined, to those of you who this may be your first Sunday in the pulpit, I invite you not just to show up here on Sundays, but to get engaged, to help shift and transform, to be the change you wish to see in this congregation, to be the change you wish to see in this world here and in the wider world. What a blessing it is to have that opportunity and to know that we have all the power we need to be the change we wish to see in the world. So let us shine our lives like a light, as the song went. So I invite you to rise in body or in spirit and join with me in our closing hymn.